My name is Naomi, and my work requires me to do many different things. I make documentary films about social and political themes. I design immersive and interactive experiences through media. I have experimented with virtual reality storytelling. And recently, I am teaching myself ludology, which is the act of studying and playing games. And I'm really lucky to be able to follow my curiosity. It's a fortunate place to be. But this approach also requires me to be a lifelong student. I constantly need to learn new skills, upgrade, and evolve my thinking. But all this learning is self-initiated. That means that I don't use school to do them. I use the internet. Don't write me off just yet. Back when I was in school, I felt demotivated and uninspired. Like I didn't have a choice over what I got to learn. Back then, learning for me was just a means to an end, the end being exams. I had this dysfunctional belief that my grades would determine my future. And I didn't have very good grades. And so I didn't feel entitled to the life that I wanted. What I didn't realize back then was that there's never really an end to learning, especially in the world we live in now. At the pace at which it is evolving, we constantly need to adapt to new knowledge and new skills. So I had a bit of unlearning to do. It might be important at this point to distinguish between learning and schooling. The truth is that I wasn't bad at learning. I was just bad at learning in the way that it was prescribed in school. And it isn't just me. This is the experience of countless students out there, even today. There are some reasons for this. Our schooling system was built in a different era. The Industrial Revolution had created a need to rapidly teach a lot of people very specific skills, create mass literacy. And we industrialized learning too. But we lost something in transition. We lost the ability to pay attention to individuals and their personal learning journeys. But the Industrial Revolution is done. And we live in a post-Google, post-Wikipedia age. On the internet, reality is no longer stagnant, lifeless, unadaptive, like how it is in a textbook or a lecture. We now have the world's information at the tip of our fingers. This is just indicative of how complex our world has become. And to meet these challenges, the 21st century needs new skills. It requires us to be more creative while solving problems and not just following orders. It requires us to think more critically about the information we consume, not really memorize it through rote learning anymore. We need to collaborate across disciplines, not just stay confined in our neatly designated fields. We need to understand things effectively in order to be able to communicate at scale. So when we have already recognized all of this, why have our institutes failed to adjust to these methods? Let's ask ourselves a question as a community, one that would benefit not just us, but more importantly, the generations that come after us. How might we foster a better relationship towards learning through methods that meet the demands of the 21st century? While being in a profession that is all about creating experiences and telling stories, there have been some interesting takeaways that I have had. And some of these takeaways might lend itself to enhancing education as we know it. Have you noticed that adults and children alike never feel like it's a chore when they watch a movie or play a sport or do something that's considered fun? This is what differentiates entertainment from education. Let's take a look at films as a medium. Everybody recognizes its capacity to entertain us, to absorb us in its stories. We need to be able to acknowledge that these stories have the power of transmitting ideas, consciously or subconsciously, through its plot or its characters. We can relate to perspectives of those outside of ourselves and tap into what is known as empathy. Sure, we can learn about the histories of a place through a text, or hear about how climate change affects us through a lecture. But what we miss out on is what is happening to people under the surface. The thing is that we're hardwired to learn through one another's experiences. Back in the Stone Age, our ancestors sat around a fire, exchanging anecdotes that were crucial to our survival and reproduction, and that helped us navigate the world. Think of stories as a vessel that store and transmit crucial learnings, or a map that indicates to us social and moral behavior, teaches us values and character. But they can also entertain us, delight us, move us, anger us, make us question. Take, for instance, a documentary called An Insignificant Man. This was the first film that I worked on professionally, and it transformed the way I saw stories forever. For those who don't know, the film explores the rise of a novice party called the Aam Aadmi Party and the journey of a regular common man known as Arvind Kejriwal, who becomes the first-time Chief Minister of Delhi. We can all relate to the story of an underdog fighting an uphill battle that seems to have overwhelming odds, right? A story that leverages the human experience of struggling and overcoming something that is larger than ourselves, and hence being a conduit for larger ideas and conversations. In the screenings that we had across the country, the film actually triggered conversations such as, is democracy just limited to our ability to vote once in 5 years? Or is it more than that? How much participation of regular people should a democracy allow? We saw conversations like these opening up, not just among audiences in India, but worldwide. Audiences came from countries that experienced similar political upheavals and exchanged those stories with one another. Imagine a whole political lesson being broken down to students through first-hand experiences of people all around the world. Can two-way discourse like this exist in the pages of a textbook? Imagine how this approach through stories would help better in honing skills like communication and critical thinking. Civic engagement is a very important topic, but how we impart it to people gets kind of boring. Students sit at their desks and learn definition after definition, but never learn how this participation will affect and change every aspect of their lives. But imagine if these lessons were to be imparted to students by literally transporting them to a historical event that demonstrates these concepts, that completely engulfs them, immerses them. We did exactly this with virtual reality. This is a film called Right to Pray that I worked on as an editor. It was the first ever VR documentary that came out of India and shows us a certain struggle for rights and resources. The film puts you in the shoes of women from Sabrimala who are fighting for the right to enter places of worship, places that they have been barred from because of patriarchal notions of purity and tradition. To feel a part of that struggle, to feel like you're encountering it firsthand, can maximize empathy. We also made a virtual reality experience called Caste is Not a Rumor, which drops you in the center of Dalit protests that broke out in Gujarat. Once again, it encourages you to see the perspectives of those whose voices are otherwise unrepresented in formal education. These stories give you the opportunity to know yourself by stepping outside your own mind and seeing yourself in relation to the world. Empathy is the driver for radical social change, and that is going to be necessary for us to transform our societies. Visual storytelling mediums make ideas durable. They act as a good segue to put into context information that might otherwise seem remote and unrelatable to us at first. We just need to find ways to make empathy more habitual in education, so we can help students answer the question, so what? Why should I care? Just like how humans are hardwired to tell stories, we're also hardwired to engage in play. You see, games from the beginning teach us how to pursue a goal and different ways of approaching that goal. It provides us with tools and incentives to either solve that mystery or win that battle or find that treasure. Similar behavior can be observed when you put a kid in a playground. Let's say that they're climbing a jungle gym for the very first time, and they figure out that they need to climb all the way to the top to be able to slide down. And once they have figured this out, it's probable that they would do this again and again. But maybe this time, they would do something slightly differently. Try another path or another section of the jungle gym. They might fall, but they intuitively understand that this failure is not absolute. Because in play, there is no such thing as screwing up. It's a safe and supportive environment to try, test, and tinker. I'm lucky to be in a professional environment where every day feels like what school should have felt like. I experiment with different mediums and play around with my ideas. My current challenge is now experimenting with how stories and games can come together and act as a catalyst for change. I'm building a story-based game module that could help tweens, teenagers, and young adults build critical thinking skills when encountering fake news on the internet. For some time now, the internet has been contaminated with misinformation and disinformation. And we need to ask ourselves, how often do we question the source of our news? Do we ask who's creating this information we see on social media or our WhatsApp groups? How often do we end up passing along this information without having critically analyzed it? The internet, unlike school, does not adhere to a curriculum of carefully crafted material. But if this was school, we would have all failed that test. It's naive to look at education and entertainment in binaries, for one must support the other to maximize engagement and immersion. But this also puts a lot of responsibility on an entertainment industry that needs to see the value in their stories in shaping individual beliefs and societies. Some stories tend to promote harmful notions of patriarchy, or violence, or poor social conduct and sexual conduct. This just further cements dysfunctional beliefs that our society already struggles with. If we simply looked at entertainment with the same lens of responsibility that we do to education, the quality of the content that we create and demand as a country would automatically improve. So today, if I would like to leave you with any singular thought, it would be that education and entertainment are not two separate entities, but two sides of the same coin, modern media. We have the responsibility as lifelong learners to demand better stories, better ideas, and better values from both our education and entertainment systems in our country. Thank you.